Welcome to a series of videos dedicated to installing Ruby on a macOS computer. So if you are a Windows user, you can feel free to skip this batch of videos. There is a separate batch of videos immediately after these that will show you how to set up Ruby on a Windows computer, because the process is a little bit different. If you are a Mac user, then you are in the right place. Before we get started installing Ruby, I want to introduce you to a program that is already installed on your computer, and it is called the terminal. I have the terminal open right here in front of me, and all that this is a basic prompt that allows us to issue text commands to our operating system, to our Mac, basically. And before we had the modern graphical user interfaces that we have today, where we have buttons and animations and visual icons and clicks and that kind of stuff. Before that, this was the only way to communicate with our computer. We would just issue some kind of command, we would press enter, the computer would receive that command, you would either understand it or not understand it, and then it would execute it. And the terminal is still in use today whenever you are a professional developer, because there's many operations that you can only do from the terminal. And in addition, there's also operations that are much faster to execute in the terminal, simply because it does not have to render any kind of visual component for you to see. It's a lot more simple and bare bones. We simply give instructions, the computer processes them, evaluates them, and then gives us back the output. So in order to be able to work with Ruby, I do want you to be comfortable with the basics of the terminal. So in this lesson, we're going to learn a few common commands that are worth knowing when working with the terminal. First up, of course, let's learn about how we can actually access this application. So the first thing we can do is bring up Spotlight Search, which you can access by holding the Command key and pressing space. And in here, you can search for terminal. This application should automatically be installed on your Mac computer. And if I open it like so, it's just going to pop up the actual application. Keep in mind, the aesthetic look of your terminal may be different from mine. You may have a different background color, a different font color, a different font size. Those things don't really matter. They're all customizable within this program. The key idea behind this program is the actual text commands that you issue. So if it looks a little bit different from mine, don't worry, that's totally fine. All right, we can close this application as always by simply pressing the X button right here, or using the shortcut Command Q on our keyboard to close the terminal. The second place that you can find your terminal is going to be in your Applications folder. So right here in my Finder window, I've clicked Applications. And in here, if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see a Utilities folder. And in the Utilities folder, you'll find the terminal application. What I recommend you do is click, hold, and drag this application to your dock, just so that you have easy access to it at all times and can simply click it once to open it, right? Really easy to find that way. All right. That's basically it. That's where you can locate the terminal application and how you launch it. Let's now actually get to know a couple commands that we can do within this application. The first one that I want to introduce you to is pwd, and that is short for Print Working Directory. The word print in technical terms means to output, and working directory is simply the folder on our file system that we are currently in. So if I execute this, I'm going to get /users/strideadmin. That is the folder that I am currently inside of in the terminal. Keep in mind, this content is likely to be different on your end. It depends most likely on your username. So you're typically going to see /users/your username. That's totally fine. Your folder is simply called something different than mine. And just to reiterate what this concept means, I'm going to bring up my Finder window again. Once again, we have the idea of folders on our file system. We just saw an example of that. We have an Applications folder, and inside it we have a Utilities folder. And in our Finder window, we navigate by double-clicking into a folder and going inside it. It's the same idea here in the terminal. We can use this application to navigate up and down between folders, and pwd tells us where we currently are, the folder or directory that we are currently inside of. Okay? So we know where we are. How can we find out the files and folders that are available within the current folder that we are in? For that, there's a command called ls. That is short for list. And when I execute this, we're going to see all of the files and folders within the Stride admin directory. So here we can see a lot of familiar folders: desktop, documents, downloads, etc. Okay? Finally, The last command I want to introduce you to in this lesson is cd, which is short for change directory. This is how we navigate into a directory. So let's say I want to go into the desktop folder. The way I'm going to do that is write cd change directory, then a space, then I'm going to type out the directory that I want to navigate into. So I'm going to type out desktop. And it's very important that you don't make any typos and also that you honor the original character casing of the folder name, right? So in this case, desktop starts with a capital D, so you have to make sure that you make that D capital, otherwise it's not going to work. Then I'm going to press enter, and now we're going to navigate into that directory. I can confirm this by executing pwd again, print working directory, and you can see we're now in /desktop, right? And then the commands apply again, right? So if I want to use ls to see all the contents of the desktop directory, there we go. You can see I have a file there and I have a folder called React, okay? So pwd to see where we are, ls to print the files and folders where we are, and then cd followed by a directory name to navigate into that directory. So that is navigation moving down, but how can we move up? How can we progress up one level to where we were, right? So in this case, what if I want to go from desktop back up to the Stride admin folder? The way I do that is by still using the cd command, but instead of providing a name, I just provide 2 dots. That means go one level up, go one directory up, one folder up, right? So when I execute this, we're now going to go back into the Stride admin directory. I can prove this again by typing out pwd, and there we go. We have the original folder where we began, okay? So cd followed by the folder name to go down, cd followed by 2 dots to go up. Finally, the last thing I want to show you in this lesson is a really cool feature called tab completion. Tab completion allows you to use the tab key to auto-complete certain commands as well as file and folder names. So for example, let's say I want to once again go into the desktop folder and I say, okay, cd des. I just start typing these characters out. If you take a look at our available directories right here, you'll see that only desktop starts with those characters of des. And the terminal is smart enough to figure out when we press the tab key that we want to go into desktop because that is the only folder that matches this criteria of starting with these 3 characters. So simply here, if I type out des and press tab, the terminal will automatically complete that folder name. And obviously that's beneficial for 2 reasons. Number 1, it's a lot quicker than typing. And number 2, it's a lot less prone to error because the terminal is always going to get the folder name right. It's not going to make a mistake like we can on the keyboard. Now keep in mind, this will only work if the terminal can figure out what we're referring to. So for example, if I just type a capital D, that is not enough information for the terminal to know what we're referring to, right? Because this could be either desktop or documents or downloads. So take a look at what happens when I press the tab key. The terminal will instead give us an output of all the possible options that it could be. So you'll see the directories there that start with a capital D. So let's say I type another O character and press tab again. Now it's narrowed down the list to the remaining 2 directories that start with DO, documents and downloads. So finally, I can do something like press a C key that will allow the terminal to identify that we mean the documents directory. So when I press tab, it will auto-complete that, and then I can press enter and navigate as I normally do. All right, so that is a feature called tab completion. You can also use it to complete file names, but keep in mind, it will only work in certain contexts, right? So for example, cd will not work with file names because we can't navigate into a file, right? We can only navigate into a directory. So cd will only work with directory names. However, later on, when we're running Ruby from our terminal and you want to specify the specific Ruby file to run, at that point, you can absolutely use tab completion to auto-complete a file name because it's valid to run the Ruby terminal program with a Ruby file. We'll show you more of that later on. It just goes to show that tab completion works in a bunch of really helpful scenarios. Okay, so now that we are comfortable with the basics of the terminal, we are good to proceed with our Ruby installation. We're going to start that in the next lesson by running some commands in the terminal to install some prerequisite dependencies for setting up Ruby. So I'll see you there.